I still remember the exact sound of the rain that night. Soft, steady, almost apologetic. It was the kind of rain that made the city blur, as if the world itself didn't want me to see too clearly. I had come home early, a rare thing for me back then. I'd bought a bottle of wine, her favorite, and two small tarts from that bakery on 7th she loved. I remember thinking I'd surprise her. Funny, isn't it? How often betrayal hides inside what we think are kind gestures. When I opened the door, I noticed first that the music was too loud. Not our music, not the jazz she used to play while cooking. Something else, something heavier, unfamiliar. Then I saw her shoes tossed near the couch, one heel bent, her jacket thrown carelessly across the armrest. That wasn't like her. She was always neat, meticulous. My heart started to quicken, though I didn't yet understand why. And then I saw it, her reflection in the mirror of our hallway. Not alone. His hand on her waist. Her laugh. The one that used to belong to me. I didn't enter the room. I didn't shout. Didn't throw the wine bottle like I imagined I might if I ever faced something like that. I just stood there long enough for the scene to etch itself into me like a photograph I never asked to take. Then I turned around and left. I walked for hours. The rain kept falling, and I let it. Maybe it was my punishment, or maybe my baptism. The streets were almost empty, except for a few stray cats and the neon lights bleeding through puddles. I wandered until I found myself in front of a small pawn shop. The sign flickered weakly. Buy, sell, trade. I don't know why I went in. Maybe I just wanted to step out of the rain, or maybe something deeper was already pulling me forward. Inside, the shop smelled of dust and time. My eyes landed on a camera in the corner, an old Nikon, probably from the 70s. I picked it up and the owner, an old man with a cigarette hanging from his lips, said, $30. Still works if you treat it right. I bought it without thinking. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Her, him, the way her fingers rested on his shoulder. So I went out again, camera in hand. I didn't know what I was looking for. I just pressed the shutter whenever something caught my eye. A man smoking under a streetlight, a woman waiting alone at a bus stop, a dog shaking off the rain. Each click felt like breathing again. Over the next weeks, the camera became my companion, my confession booth, my way of making sense of silence. I started waking up early just to catch the morning light spilling over the rooftops. I stopped checking my phone. I stopped waiting for her messages. I started living through the lens instead of through memory. One afternoon, I printed some of my photos and pinned them on the wall. The images were quiet but full of ache. Lonely figures framed by shadow. Streets shimmering with after-rain reflections. My friend Daniel, who ran a small cafe downtown, came by and saw them. "You should show these," he said. "Show them where?" "Anywhere people can feel them." He helped me set up a small exhibition in his cafe, 30 photographs hung on white walls that still smelled of coffee and cinnamon. I didn't expect anyone to come, but people did. They stood in front of the images longer than I thought they would. Some smiled, some looked sad. One woman cried. A week later, a local gallery owner offered me a real exhibition. And just like that, everything changed. I became the photographer who captures loneliness. They wrote articles, interviews, asked me what inspired my work. I told them it was life. I didn't tell them it was heartbreak. Months passed, then a year. And one evening during the opening of my second show, she came. She stood quietly in front of one of my photographs. A shot of a couple holding hands under the same kind of rain that had once witnessed our ending. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment I felt the old ache return, softer now, like the echo of a storm long gone. "I've been following your work," she said. "It's beautiful." "Thank you," I replied. "You found something. After everything." "I think I just learned to look," I said. She smiled, that same smile I used to know, but it no longer hurt. It just existed, like the memory of a song you once loved, but no longer need to hear. When she left, I stood by the window and watched the rain begin again. And for the first time, I realized that night, the one that had shattered me hadn't been an ending after all. It was the first frame of a new story, because sometimes the moment you lose everything is the moment you finally start to see. Fame, as it turned out, was quieter than I'd imagined. People think it roars, flashes, applause, interviews, bright lights. But in truth, it hums. It seeps into your life in whispers. Strangers recognizing you on the street, emails with subject lines that begin with opportunity, and the soft sound of your own name being said in rooms you've never entered. For a while, I drifted on that hum. My photographs hung in galleries across the city, then across oceans, Paris, Berlin, New York. People told me my work made them feel less alone, and I wanted to believe them. But at night, when the lights dimmed and the walls were bare again, I often wondered whether I'd simply built my success out of the ruins of something I never truly let go of. It was during one of those lonely exhibitions in Vienna that I met her, Elise. She was a journalist, though she carried herself more like a poet. I noticed her before she spoke, the way she lingered at each photograph, her gaze soft but unflinching, like she wasn't just looking at the image but into it. When she finally approached me, she didn't ask the usual questions. She said, "All your photographs feel like you're searching for someone who isn't there." And I remember smiling. Maybe I am. Elise didn't want to interview me for a magazine. She wanted to understand. We started talking after the show, in a small bar with old jazz records playing in the background, where the candles were low and the wine tasted like nostalgia. She told me about her father, a painter who'd lost his sight. I told her about the night I lost everything and found my camera instead. We met again the next day, and the next. Before I realized it, she was following me on my walks. Quiet, curious, always just a step behind. Sometimes she'd ask questions like, "What made you stop here?" Or, "Why that angle?" Other times, we didn't speak at all. We just wandered, two shadows crossing the same city. One evening, while the sun was bleeding out across the rooftops, she turned to me and said, "You photograph loneliness, but I don't think you're lonely anymore." I didn't answer her, not because I disagreed, but because I didn't yet know if she was right. Love the second time around doesn't rush in. It moves carefully, like light creeping across a wall at dawn. It doesn't demand, it waits. Elise never tried to fill the silence between us. She honored it. And somehow, that made me trust her. Months later, she became part of my photographs without ever posing for them. A hand here, a silhouette in the corner of a cafe, a reflection in a rain-soaked window. I realized I was no longer documenting absence. I was recording presence, hers, mine, the fragile kind of togetherness that doesn't erase the past but builds around it. When my next exhibition opened, I called it After the Light. The critics said it marked a shift, from solitude to connection, one of them wrote. I smiled when I read that, because they were right, though they didn't know why. Elise stood beside me that night, her hand brushing mine. The crowd moved like a tide around us, but for a few moments the world went still. She leaned in and whispered, "Do you ever think about her, the one who broke you?" I looked at the photograph in front of us. A quiet street, a single lamppost, a faint shadow of two people walking away from each other. "Sometimes," I said, "but now when I do, it doesn't hurt. It just feels necessary." Elise smiled, that small, knowing smile that said she understood. And in that moment, I realized something simple and profound. The camera had once been my escape, but now it was my way back. Back to feeling, to connection, to love that wasn't born from loss, but from choice. Fame came and went in waves, as it always does. Exhibitions opened, reviews were written, names were spoken, and then one day they stopped. But by then, I had what I needed. Elise and I bought a small house by the sea. Mornings smelled of salt and coffee, nights of film and darkroom chemicals. Sometimes we'd drive to the cliffs just to watch the light die over the water. She'd rest her head on my shoulder, and I'd think of how far I'd come from that rain-soaked night years ago. From the sound of betrayal to the sound of waves. I still take photographs, not to forget anymore, but to remember. And every time I press the shutter, I think, this too is a beginning. The sea is slower now, or maybe I am. It still hums against the shore, still breathes its endless rhythm, but I no longer chase it with my camera. These days, I just sit by the window with a cup of coffee, watching how the morning light moves across the floorboards like a shy guest unsure of where to settle. Elise is in the garden. I can hear her humming, somewhere beyond the open window. The same tune she's been humming for years, though I still don't know where she learned it. Sometimes she forgets the words. Sometimes I forget what day it is. That's how time works when you've lived long enough. It stops counting and starts blending. I don't take many photographs anymore. My hands shake now, and the focus slips. But I still keep the old Nikon, that same camera I bought the night everything fell apart. It sits on the shelf above my desk, worn and dented, the metal dull from years of touch. I think of it sometimes as a witness, the only thing that saw every version of me. A few months ago, a young photographer visited me for an interview. He must have been 25, eyes bright, hands restless, full of all the hunger I once had. He asked me, "Do you ever regret it? What happened back then?" I thought about it for a long time before I answered. "No," I said finally. "You can't regret the door that led you here, even if it hurt to open." He didn't quite understand. I saw it in his face, that impatience of youth that wants clean stories, clear reasons, neat conclusions. Life isn't like that. Love isn't either. After he left, I went out to the garden where Elise was pruning the roses. She looked up, her face half lit by the sunset, and smiled at me the way she always does, softly, as if she still couldn't believe we ended up here. I took a photograph then. My last, maybe. No composition, no planning. Just a moment caught between breaths, her hands, the roses, the dying light. When I developed it later, I noticed something I hadn't seen through the lens. In the background, through the open window, my reflection was faintly visible. Older, smaller, but there. And I realized every photograph I've ever taken was really a self-portrait. Even the ones of strangers, of streets, of rain, especially those. Now, when the light fades in the evenings, I sit by the sea with Elise and listen. We don't speak much. We don't need to. Sometimes she takes my hand and says, "Do you remember the night you found that camera?" And I always smile. "I remember," I say. "It was the night I lost everything." She tilts her head, amused, and found what mattered. The sea sighs, the light dims. The shutter of the world keeps opening and closing. Every wave, every breath, every heartbeat, another frame in the endless roll of life. I used to think betrayal was the end of my story. Now I know it was just the first photograph, the dark exposure before the light. And in that soft, fading glow, with her hand still warm in mine, I finally understand. We are never really broken. We're just waiting to be developed.